Hi, everyone, and thanks for coming to the Newburgh Clean Water Project session. Our community voices silence, speak out against environmental injustice. We are doing this because it's too often people who bear the burden of policy decisions are left out of the decision making process. And we want to turn that around by giving as much information and encouragement as possible to help us all mind our business. Tonight, we will update you on the status of our work to get clean water for our community, and we are lucky to be joined by some special guests who will brief us on police accountability in Orange County, or how we are supposed to be, or how we are supported by law enforcement, and the upcoming hearings on Danskammer Power Plant, which will dictate the breathability of our air for decades to come. All of these things, our say in our water, law enforcement, and energy, are about justice. Before we get started, I would like to let everyone know that we are recording this session. If you do not want to be recorded, you can turn off your video and edit your name to avoid identification. Just click the three dots and you will see edit name. You can put your questions and comment in the chat, as can everyone. We can we also request that people hold their questions till after each presentation. There will be time for questions, we promise. First up, Jamal May's poem, There Are Birds. Um, okay.
Jeannie, I think the audio isn't working. We can't hear it. You may have to unmute yourself in order for us to hear it. I don't know.
There are birds here. There are so many birds here, is what I was trying to say when they said those birds are metaphors for what is trapped between fences and buildings. No, the birds are here to root around for bread the girls' hands tear and toss like confetti. No, I don't mean the bread is torn like cotton. I said confetti. And no, not the confetti a tank can make out of a building. I mean, the confetti a boy can't stop smiling about. And no, his smile isn't much like a skeleton at all. And no, their neighborhood is not like a war zone. I am trying to say that their neighborhood is as tattered and feathered as anything else, as shadow pierced by sun and light parted by shadow dance as anything else. But they won't stop saying how lovely the ruins, how ruined the lovely children must be in your birdless city.
Hi, I'm Renee Latu.
Hey, everybody. Forgive us for a little bit last minute coordination. We have a water report for you, which I will give. And my name is Deborah Brown. I'm with the Newburgh Clean Water Project. Bear with me. I'm going to find my report. And here it is. So we want to make sure that everyone knows that we are still on, that we are now on New York City Catskill Aqueduct water, where we were on Browns Pond before. So just in case anybody doesn't know, that's what we're doing. We're back on New York City water, and please let people know if they don't know. In terms of things that are going on late, there is something that's called A126S, which is a letter, a bill that our partners are at Environmental Advocates of New York and us have signed onto. We are asking that state lawmakers pass this bill that would jumpstart testing for emerging contaminants in drinking water. And emerging contaminants are basically toxins that people don't know about. They can be anything from people throwing away their prescription medications and that gets in your water, to things we know about, like what's in our community, the PFAS coming off of the military base. You know, stuff like when you toss your cigarette out your car window and that cigarette has 400 chemicals and it gets down a stormwater drain, and you know, are those chemicals getting into our water? So it's lots of different things. And millions of New Yorkers still don't know if there are harmful chemicals in their water that could make them sick. And the bill would ensure that New York finally takes action to locate drinking water pollution, including from many PFAS chemicals, and accelerate cleanup efforts around the state. And I guess this bill doesn't have a name. They often don't. It is called A126S S1759. So if, as we go, I'm going to Google and see if I can find a name, and I'll let you know at the end of the program so that you can know what to support. So we will keep you posted as to actions as things progress, and we plan to meet with some of these lawmakers in April. There's going to be a lobbying time where we're going to do that. On the national level, there is something called the Water Act that we are all for, and that has to do with water affordability, transparency, equity, and reliability. And that is what all the letters in water stand for. Once again, water affordability, transparency, equity, and reliability. That Water Act was just reintroduced by Senator Bernie Sanders, Representative Brenda Lawrence, and Representative Ro Khanna. It would fund our water systems at the needed level to ensure that everyone can have access to clean, safe, affordable water, while prioritizing disadvantaged communities. Rural and urban support and public control would also be priorities. Sean Patrick Maloney is currently not a co-sponsor of this bill, and it would be great if he were. So people can reach out to him at 845-561-1259, and you don't have to memorize that. Jen is putting it in the chat, and you can copy it. And Food and Water Watch will be hosting a webinar tomorrow night where you can find out more. And Jen is also going to be putting that in the chat if anybody's interested. And I'm wondering if anybody has any questions or anything to add to that. Chuck, I don't know if you're here or if anybody has anything to add or ask.
I just want to get the number again to the Maloney's office.
I will say it, and it is also in the chat. Cynthia.
Okay. I don't know how to get in that chat, so I'm not that computer savvy.
No problem. I will say it for you.
Thank you.
Got it. 845.
Okay.
561.
Okay.
1259.
Thank you.
Got it. And also, I just want to tell you about the chat because it will change your Zoom life. If you look at the very bottom of your screen, there's like a little bubble like in the funny papers, and that's the chat. And if you just click on that, you'll see lots of information. All right, does anybody have anything else to add in terms of things you want people in the community to know about our water, or any questions? Anything we haven't covered?
Hi, Deborah.
Yes.
Hi, it's Chuck. I spoke with the CDC ATSDR group that did the testing last October.
Yes.
And the follow-up testing of 100 individuals here in Newburgh. I was trying to get an update on where that's at. And because of COVID responsibilities on the CDC, they were sidetracked in getting our work done. But they expect to have those values back out to the individuals, the 100 individuals that were tested, in about 2 weeks. And after the individuals get it, they will release the information to everyone. So they'll do a community notice. So there has been some progress, and that's the follow-up testing from the testing that was done 2 years ago. And then they retested a random sample of 100 households in Newburgh. And now they're talking about coming back and they're going to release that data, and they're coming back to test a sample of that for environmental at each household, for environmental contaminations in each household. So I just thought that would be an update for you guys to have.
Great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. And thanks for the response on my definition of environmental justice. And what I'm trying to get at really is, what does that mean for Newburgh, that we are an environmental justice community?
That's a really good question. I can say something about that. Does anybody else have something they want to say? I don't want to just hog everything. And I'm also realizing that I forgot to say, Jeannie, thank you for playing the poem and jumping on at the last minute and being amazing. Thank you so much.
I could say something on that.
Yeah, go for it, Cynthia.
Environmental justice means to communities like Newburgh that we are concerned with the environment. Therefore, we are finding ways to fight the large businesses that create the environment that we are forced to live in, which is unhealthy most of the time. And it also means equitable justice for communities like Newburgh that are not as knowledgeable about the environment and what it can do to them. So that's what I think it means for the city of Newburgh.
I think that sounds right. And I think, one thing I have to tell you, I always hate that term, environmental justice, because really it's about environmental injustice. And, an environmental justice community is a place where there is injustice. And one of the forms that it takes has to do with everything you just said, Cynthia, in terms of being a place where companies feel free to dump because they think people are powerless and won't say anything, or if they do, nobody's going to listen. And that tends to be people who are people of color or who are vulnerable in some way, like they are illegal immigrants, which also tends to be,
or they're simply poor.
Or poor.
And poor people in this country are treated like criminals.
Right.
And they're treated as if they don't matter.
Right.
So we, as a community, we have to be a voice for those people because they don't know how to speak up for themselves all the time.
Right.
So, I don't mean to hijack the meeting because I want to hear about what Food and Water Watch and everybody's doing. But I'm trying to think of what are the specific benefits, if you will. It's hard to get a benefit from something that be in an environmental injustice community, but how do we leverage that? I mean, is there funding available to the city of Newburgh because we're an environmental injustice community? Newburgh's got lots of things going on. I'm the chairman of the CAC, the Conservation Advisory Council, and we're in the middle of doing a tree planting effort. We received $40,000 from New York State towards tree remediation, mostly taking down trees, unfortunately, but also beginning to restore trees on Broadway. But I'd like to leverage that into additional funding. And our contention is that trees will make a huge difference to our environment. And is there some way that can be looped into the discussion?
You know what? It can. Do you mind if we hold that for after the presentations? Because we should have time. I think we'll have at least 10 minutes at the end where we'll be able to address that. Those are super great questions. And okay, so I think the next thing is we've got Mark Sanchez-Potter, who's going to tell us about the hearings about Danskammer that are happening next week and what we can do, how we can participate. And Mark, I have a great intro for you that I'm going to read. Mark Sanchez-Potter is a graduate student and teacher living in the city of Newburgh. He's been active with both Newburgh Clean Water Project and Food and Water Action in opposing the expansion of the Danskammer power plant. And we know that there are hearings next week. Could you tell us when they are, a little bit about them, and how we can get our opinion heard?
Thank you, Deborah, and thank you everyone for coming on this call tonight. So there's an Article 10 process going on currently with the state of New York, and that basically means that Danskammer, which is a fracked gas power plant on the Hudson in the town of Newburgh, is applying to be expanded and to quote unquote upgrade. It would become a baseline plant. So it's currently a peaker plant. It would go, it would be renovated and it would go full time. Pollution would expand about 40% once it goes online full time. It'd be operational about 70% of the time. So next Wednesday, on March 31st, there's going to be a series of public hearings. There's going to be one at 1 p.m. and 6 p.m. And these are about 4-hour-long hearings in which the general public is allowed to come and give their opinion. There will be elected officials there as well. The entity that is hosting these hearings is called the Public Siting Board. And it consists of members and commissioners from different agencies. So the Department of Environmental Conservation, the Department of Health, Transportation, Commerce, and a few other departments. They're picked by Governor Cuomo, as well as 2 individuals from the community. Most of the time, these are elected officials who are chosen. So it might be a councilman from the town of Newburgh and a council person from the town of Marlborough, because that's where that's where the power plant is in Danskammer. But I'm going to share my screen. You can register to speak at either one of. I'm going to just share my screen real quick. Can you all see that? Okay. You can register, and I will share this in the chat. So we have a form, instructions for registering for the March 31st Danskammer public hearing meeting. So you have to register by Monday, the March 29th at 5 p.m. They don't use Zoom. They use a system called WebEx, which is what they use for the rack. But with this, there isn't a camera option, so you can't see other people like we are right now. It's just going to be audio, but you'll be on a computer or you can call in, and I will share this. So there's the 1 p.m. meeting, and then there's the 6 p.m. meeting. And you have to click on the link, fill out your information, and register. And then you'll get a confirmation email. And there's also a way of doing that by phone. You can also submit written comments, but we're really pushing for folks to give spoken comments. There's also a website that will take you to it. It's called stoptheplant.org, and this is the Stop Danskammer Coalition. So this is various groups like Newburgh Clean Water Project, Food and Water Watch, Clearwater, Riverkeeper, basically a bunch of environmental groups and different community organizations. So right on the top, it's register by 5 p.m. March 29th to comment at the public hearing on March 31st. You can click on that, and it will take you to the link to register. Now, and I'm gonna present this. So what to expect. And this was taken from a really great organizer, Shay O'Reilly from Sierra Club. So there will be two sides. There'll be an opposing side and a side that'll be basically for Danskammer. And these are going to be the company, as well as some organized labor and some elected officials from Marlborough and the town of Newburgh. Elected officials will be allowed to give their testimony first. I say testimony, but it's really public comment. So even though this is these are legal documents, because the Article 10 process is like a trial. Earth Justice, Sierra Club, and various other groups have actual lawyers who will be arguing behind the scenes in smaller trials. So elected officials will get to go first. So these systems are designed to make you feel small. They're very formal and bureaucratic. And especially now with WebEx, you know, it's very compartmentalized. So, you know, it's difficult. It is okay if you only want to say, my name is Mark, I live in the city of Newburgh, and I'm asking you to stop Danskammer. You will be given about 3 minutes to speak. So like public comments in city council meeting. They're very strict about that, though. They will cut you off if you try to go over 3 minutes. And I think they'll just like kick you out of the meeting. So you are only given 3 minutes to speak. So you must say where you're from and your clear statement of opposition. So your name, your town or county, and, you know, I'm opposed to Danskammer. So again, why do you feel this way? So think about your own reasons for wanting to act. Why does this matter to you? Who or what are you trying to protect? What do you fear? And you don't also have, and we'll have some talking points, but this is for the general public to state their opinion and to state their feelings. You don't have to quote research or graphs or anything like that. All you have to say is, my name is Mark, or your name, I'm from the city of Newburgh, and I oppose Danskammer because it would be bad for our air, our climate, and our water. That is perfectly fine. And this is Shay's contact. I will put that in other people's contact in the chat. I'm going to stop sharing. And go. Yeah. So so it's really important that you register, and I will put these in the chat. You will not be allowed to speak. It'll be you'll be able to see it on the Department of Environmental Conservation's website, but that's a live stream of the judges, they're called, these commissioners, but it won't allow you to comment. And they are very strict about the 3-minute rule and about registering beforehand. And I will definitely put in the talking points as well into the chat. So if you have any questions, please ask. I'm here to answer questions. I know that was a lot to digest. We just had a really big organizing meeting yesterday where we had 220 people show up. It was beautiful. And we got, you know, over 130 people signed up last night and willing to testify. So we really need to flood these public hearings, because we're probably only going to get 1 or 2 public hearings. So we really need, you know, people power. So if you have any questions, please ask.
I see a question in the chat.
Yeah, I was going to say, Mark, we have a question from Stephanie. She wanted to know, how is Danskammer getting through after Scenic Hudson's battery cell presentation? Was groundswell by organizing groups at this point? 220 people, great work. It's
So
also a comment, but
thank you. So to answer this, Scenic Hudson they do amazing work, and they presented alternatives, and one of them was a battery storage facility. They kind of, Danskammer is a fossil fuel company. They're actually a front group, in my opinion, from a large Wall Street hedge fund called Tiger Infrastructure. They're part of a portfolio that this large Wall Street group has. They're not interested in battery storage, even though Scenic Hudson and other groups have presented this information. They've submitted it to the docket. It would be more environmentally friendly, and it would just make sense to invest in battery storage. But Danskammer really doesn't care, because they're in it to make money, and the federal government is incentivizing building frack gas power plants in the Hudson Valley through the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, FERC. So even if this goes operational for a few years, they're standing to make hundreds of millions of dollars. So they're going to make whatever they invest in back, So it's a money game for them. They don't care about the environment. On the flip side, yes, we are starting to have groundswell. We had 220 people, and we're having, hundreds of people write written comments. We had over 7,000 or 8,000 people sign our petitions and submit comments to the docket. So, we had people from all over New York State, basically. And before COVID, you would probably see me and other organizers out canvassing. I know we stopped at a couple of people's homes, and we had rallies. We're probably going to start doing those again in the spring. Socially distant rallies and stuff in Newburgh to really get the word out there, and build up that base again, which is really solid right now. But we could always expand and bring more people into the fight, because as we know, Newburgh is an environmental injustice community. They wouldn't put this in Scarsdale. They wouldn't put this on the Upper East Side. They're putting this in Newburgh because they think that the people won't fight back. But they're wrong. We are fighting back, and we are, we're not gonna take this lying down. So I will add those links to the chat. And if you have any more questions, please ask.
Thank you so much.
I think we do have some more questions. We don't have a lot more time, though, because I want to make sure Luisa has time to go. Maybe we can take just a few more minutes, Mark. A couple of the questions that we have are, why is the expansion bad? What would it do to our air quality? And would there be City of Newburgh jobs created by the plant?
Okay, so the first one, what would this entail? So some of the particulates or emissions that this plant would release include methane, which is about 4 times as potent as CO2 as a greenhouse gas. So it would exacerbate the climate crisis. It would also release benzene and organic particulates, which are both known to increase asthma and cancer rates. So, and because of the prevailing wind patterns, and we live in a valley, these emissions will affect the city of Newburgh, the city of Beacon, the city of Poughkeepsie, and surrounding communities the most. And the company is very tricky in their emissions reporting, because they say, our emissions will go down. CO2 would be slightly less than what it currently is because of improved technology, but methane would be 4 times as high. Benzene, organic particulates, and other really bad carcinogens would be released into the environment. What were the other 2 questions, Deborah?
The other questions were, would there be City of Newburgh jobs created by the plant? And there also one more question, which is, what's this about green hydrogen? Is that real? So jobs, green hydrogen.
hydrogen is currently in the beginning stages of development, so it's not a feasible energy source. A lot of companies are now saying we're going to switch to hydrogen in order to get their projects approved. Fossil fuel infrastructure, which, you know, it's called greenwashing, when you make yourself appear to be environmentally conscious or environmentally friendly, when really you don't give a damn and you're just trying to get the project approved. Hydrogen is, at this stage, is not feasible as an energy source because it's really experimental, and there aren't full-scale hydrogen plants anywhere to this size or to this model, and none in this country. And this plan is in direct contrast with the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, which was a law that was passed in 2019, which said that by 2040 we have to be at 100% emissions-free electricity. There's no way we can reach that goal if we continue to build these fracked gas power plants. And with jobs, there would be about 400 construction jobs. They would be union jobs, but they are not guaranteed for City of Newburgh residents. Most of these people would be coming from Texas, Ohio, Pennsylvania to work on this project. With some local labor, Local 17 is the union that's really pushing for this. You know, I fully support unions. I love unions, but not at the expense of our planet and our health. So the City of Newburgh would see no economic benefits from this. And the only thing that would see an economic benefit would be the town of Marlborough and the Marlborough School District, which is why it's being touted as this savior of Marlborough, basically. Even though it's flooded before, it's in a floodplain. So the whole project makes no sense.
All right, Mark, thank you so very much. That was I thought, a great presentation, and really appreciate you taking the time and coming and informing all of us. And yeah, just thanks for all your work. Keep going. All right, and now we're ready
Thank
to,
you.
Oh, you got it. We're ready to move on to our next presentation. And that is, we're starting a whole new segment on police accountability, because it relates to justice in an environmental justice community. And we're very lucky to have two guests, Luisa Fuentes and Cynthia Maria. Luisa is going to go first, and forgive me if I keep saying Lisa. Luisa Fuentes is an Orange County resident and a former assistant district attorney for the county, but now works exclusively with victims of domestic violence, representing them in family court matters. Luisa is working on the implementation of Executive Order 203, in which Governor Cuomo called for police reform in every district throughout New York. Luisa, thank you so much for giving us your time and your expertise. Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. So Executive Order 203's time is almost up. And what I mean by that is back in June of 2020, Governor Cuomo, in an effort to shut us up and get us off the streets after the George Floyd murder and the Breonna Taylor murder, signed in a law that required all municipalities that have their own police force and counties that had sheriff's departments to engage in a police reformation, rehabilitation, recollaboration effort with their community. And by April 1st, next week, they're supposed to have reports in that are to be ratified by their municipal governing body and then sent up to the state. The punishment for not getting this done on time was that police funding would be withheld. The reality is nobody asked whether it was going to be done well or properly. And that's the problem we faced. Throughout the Mid-Hudson Valley, we have seen communities, or I should say police departments, hire and bring on their own cronies onto these committees. They bring in people that are police officers, former police officers, Blue Lives Matter people. If they bring on people of color at all, they're usually people of color who are benefiting from the status quo and don't want necessary changes made in their communities. And so they don't have much of a voice. In Newburgh, they actually had slumlords on their committee. In other places, they didn't have a single Black person. In a community where I don't remember, they didn't have a single Black person on that committee for months and months and months, saying, well, we have somebody who's married to a Black person. I get on, and because I won't shut up, now they have 2 other Black people. So it's amazing how Black people just seem to crawl out of the woodwork when their voices are seemed or deemed necessary, but not necessary to be in this process from the beginning. What was supposed to happen was the police and the committee, which is supposed to be made up of community members, not just activists, not just heads of not-for-profits, not just police and former police officers, but community members who are the ones most affected by police brutality, because that's what this is about. Race, racism in policing, and police brutality should have had a voice. Throughout the, I'd say 150, 200 places that I am aware of, because there are actually 500 jurisdictions in New York State that would have fallen under Executive Order 203. I believe maybe 2 or 3 might have sent out actual surveys to their community members, asking them what they feel about policing in general, their police department, possibly police officers, because we all have stories about specific police officers in our areas that we know are problematic. And that is just a fact with policing in its current form. That rarely happened. They were also supposed to utilize evidence-based research about race, about racism in policing, about bias in policing. I don't like using the word bias. Let's call it what it is. Racism in policing, about police brutality and how they utilize brutality and lethal use of force against more people of color than they do against white people. We had 2 examples in the past 2 weeks. Tamar Rice, who was 12, playing with a gun in a park, a fake gun, was shot within 2 seconds of the police officers arriving at the scene. And in the past 2 weeks, 2 mass murderers have been taken alive by the police in other jurisdictions. In fact, in Ulster County, I believe it was in February, a man who actively shot in the direction of a police officer was taken out alive. And yet Daniel Prude, who was suffering a mental health break, was killed by police. And as we saw back in January, I believe it was, a 9-year-old child was sprayed in the face with pepper spray while handcuffed by a police officer. So if those instances don't raise questions, I don't know what will. And that's just in the past few weeks, not the past 400 years. So why am I here? Well, I was asked to speak. Unfortunately, right now, there's not much anybody can do. These reports are due a week from tomorrow. We've tried to push for a timeline extension. Michael Sussman and I wrote a letter to the governor and to the state that went out at the very beginning of February, giving them at least a month to respond. Not only did they not respond, and we had over 350 signers on this letter. We asked for a time extension. We asked for a compliance officer, etc. The problem is, why push it back if nobody wants to do the work anyway? They've had over almost a year to get this work done. It's not about the time limits. It's about people wanting to actually do the work. And the problem you have with police departments is they don't see that themselves as a problem. We don't have those problems here. There's no such thing as systemic racism. We don't have racism in our police department. There's no such thing as institutionalized racism in policing, despite the fact that half of the country's police forces were founded as a result of slave catchers and slave catching during enslavement of people who were then deputized and allowed to cross state and county lines to bring other human beings back as property to their property owners. That's how the Southern version of policing started. And many of us who are Black have Southern roots. And in our family's history, we hear of those stories. People talk about how, racism is over, slavery is so long ago. The last Confederate widow died in 2020. My grandfather was born in 1903. His father was a slave. It isn't that old. And it wasn't so long ago where people like me couldn't have been born because our parents who are different races could not have, in certain places in the country, have married legally and had children. So this is not old, this is not ancient history. But many of these police departments refuse to even address the issue of racism. Only a few of them in their reports put as a headline, Black Lives Matter. So it's not about the time, it's about the failure of these organizations, of these committees to want to have the difficult discussions of race, to want to have the difficult discussions of racism in policing, of disparate treatment of people of color, especially Black men, by police officers. In one organization, all they did was they literally looked at the 15-page booklet of their policies and procedures. And as soon as I opened it up right to use of force. And I said, well, here's a problem. You're saying you can use lethal use of force when somebody is evading arrest or has broken free of arrest or is leaving the scene of a crime such as a robbery or a burglary. It's not that what is written on paper is racist, it's the implementation thereof. Because if you have a racist police officer or a police officer who in this country has been taught and trained that people of color are violent, aggressive animals who are nothing but troublemakers who deserve to be treated differently, then pulling that trigger on that Black person is going to be a hell of a lot easier if your policies say it's okay. So in Newburgh, I can tell you, their policy and procedure book is about this big. It's about 8 or 9 inches thick. They decided what policies that Executive Order 203 committee was going to review. They handed them the policies. They didn't say, here are all the policies, we'll email them to you. It's going to be a whole lot of paper, so, enjoy your time at Kinko's. They said, we're going to look at policy number 8. And then next week, we're going to look at policy number 15. Why? Because the police say that those are the policies necessary? No, it wasn't. It became a police show. It became, most of these executive order committees actually had hours of presentations about how good police officers are and the good work they do in the community. When there's not an executive order about Police Appreciation Day. This was about the murder of people of color, especially Black people, by police in a racist system by a racist institution. And how do we address that in this time period? One of the things I will say in closing is Governor Cuomo never really gave a damn. If Governor Cuomo really gave a damn, he would have put in some sort of stopgap. He would have put in some sort of compliance requirement. There would have been check-ins on these reports prior to the April 1st deadline, there would have been a way to make complaints and had them addressed during the time period it was open. And he would have made sure that it wasn't just funding that was tied to their non-compliance. And here's why. The city of Newburgh gets about $16 million in funding for police. Now, I don't know how much they get in terms of state funding, but I'm pretty sure it's probably less than $1 million. So out of a $16 million budget, a place loses $1 million. Meh. The mayor of Monticello came on and he said out of their budget, which think he said was like $300,000, they'd be losing $10,000 of state funding if they didn't get EO 203 complied with. So this governor never intended it for it to have teeth, never intended it to be complied with, and really never intended for there to be actual police reform, because the police won't police themselves. The police do not want to reform themselves. That needs to be done in the community, by the community, for the community. And so one of the things I will suggest is moving forward, make demands of the city of Newburgh to have this kind of committee continued with actual community members, not cops who commute in, not people who own businesses who don't live there, and not people who are heads of community organizations who may or may not live there. What about the people on the street who are getting harassed? What about the people on the street who are getting victimized by the police? What about victims of crime, victims of domestic violence who are treated like shit by the police?
Luisa, this topic is so tremendous. I wish we had like an hour for you. I really do. It's so disturbing. And I really appreciate you coming on and telling us. And I know you got more to say. I have to just stop you though, because we need to give Cynthia Maria some time also. But I want to just ask, we got a couple minutes. Does anybody have any questions for Luisa? Well, I have one question if nobody else does. I just wanted to ask, is there press coverage of this? Because I have, I'm not so much of a media consumer, but I certainly haven't heard what you're saying. So I'm wondering if there is press coverage, and if there isn't, why not?
There's been press coverage. I've done several interviews with John Cameron from Spectrum News. So has Michael. They have been at protests and rallies where we've discussed this. We had a rally up in Albany on Breonna Taylor Day, because we were up in Albany and we called out Governor Cuomo. Every time, there are those of us who've been working on this for months and months and months, and every time we speak at anything, we bring up Executive Order 203. And there was some interest after that letter went out, but just like everything, the interest dies down when people don't see either immediate dramatic action or a big push from the community. And that's been the problem. What I'm gonna say is probably not a nice thing. If anybody here knew about Executive Order 203 and didn't speak up about it or didn't try to get involved, then to hell with you, because this was our time. Why have we been in the streets? Why have we been putting ourselves at risk for not just COVID, but for police brutality since the death of George Floyd, if not to have changes made? So if you had the opportunity to use your voice and you didn't, shame on you. Absolute shame on you. And I don't just mean the people here. I do mean the people out there too, because what I'm noticing is that these people who have been there during the fun times when it was cool and Instagrammable have disappeared when the work actually needs to be done. And now we're seeing what performative allies can do to a movement and how it can seriously debilitate it. And that's what's happening. The same people, in Monroe, they had 700 people on their first march. And yet places like Monroe, when they did their EO 203 thing, maybe 4 or 5 people showed up on their Zooms. So we have hamstrung our own selves by not having been involved, by not following, by not speaking up. Now, a big part of what happened as well is that places did not advertise the way they should have. Communities will, police will advertise when someone gets arrested and they're presumed innocent. But they couldn't advertise this executive order 203 committee, the process, the information, et cetera. And there are places that we, the community, had to put it in our own newspapers and raise money to get ads. So that also is a big shame. And so was there media coverage? Yes. Was there enough? No. It's nice to know what restaurants are open during COVID. I'd probably much rather have known how I can change my racist police department.
On that note, which is a very, very powerful note, I want to say thank you. And just, you know, again, I wish I had time to really sit with what you're saying and hear more. I want to give Cynthia Maria her time. And it's almost 5 to 7. So I'm wondering if people can stay. I know, Luisa, that you have to go, but maybe people can stay a little longer and we can hear Cynthia and then also talk with Chuck. Luisa, would you please, if there's anything you would have anybody do, can you put that in the chat before you go? Anything
Sure.
you want? Okay, thank you so very much. And if we have an opportunity to regroup and hear more, we certainly will. All right. And now we're going to move on to Cynthia Maria, who is going to take this discussion into the realm of the City of Newburgh and what's been happening here. And Cynthia Maria is a local activist steeped in Newburgh culture. She's been active in Community Voices Heard, Black Lives Matter, Democratic Socialists of America, Newburgh Matters, and Food Not Bombs. Cynthia Maria, I give it to you.
Hi, everybody, and thank you for giving me a couple of minutes. I wanted to say that I was one of the voices that stood up and talked about 203 to the city council in the city of Newburgh. I think I spoke about it 3 times, about trying to change the policies. We actually did make some headway because I advocated to try to change the language that the city of Newburgh was using in their job applications to include LGBTQ people, Black people, people who are bilingual, etc. And Mr. Donut actually did change the language. So you can probably see it if you go on the website and look up jobs. It will be on the job application now. Prior to that, it just said equal opportunity employer. So Ann Sullivan and I got together and really reamed out the city council about it. And now it's more inclusive. So that's what I have to say about that. I have been very concerned about 203 because I feel like Ms. Fuentes said that this is our time to act. It's extremely important. I just found out an hour ago that our police chief has resigned. He emailed a good friend of mine and told her that he was leaving and he would be laughing at the next police chief in the city of Newburgh. This has an enormous impact on us because now we are left with another decision to find another police chief who is willing to work with our racist police force. I don't know why he resigned. He said it was health reasons. I'm not clear if that's the real reason why, but he has resigned as of today. He asks that Omari Shakur, who is a council member, celebrate his resignation on Facebook. which I thought was a little odd. But I've been involved in a lot of stuff in the city. One thing I don't like about well, there's a lot of things I don't like about our police department. But if you do make a complaint against one of our officers, that officer will hound you and harass you continuously. This has happened to 3 people that I know of that have made complaints against the police department. This policy needs to change. If you make a complaint about an officer, you should not be followed around and harassed because of your complaint. This has got to change. We have got to come out and fight against this kind of behavior from our police department. They're supposed to serve and protect their communities, but that's not what they're doing in Newburgh. They're serving and protecting themselves. And that's why 203 is so important, because that's what they're doing here in the city. I don't know about the town. I don't know about New Windsor. I just know about the city of Newburgh because that's where I live and breathe. And I feel like stuff needs to be, we really need to step up in the next week or so, really in the next week, because we don't have that much time to talk about this 203 executive order. It's important to all of our safeties. If they're not treating one group of people in a respectful manner, then that means they have permission to treat all groups of people in a disrespectful manner. So I'm just saying, if anybody has any questions, I'll answer your questions, but this is where I stand tonight at this meeting. And thank you for having me.
Boy, thank you so much, Cynthia. You know, I'm so grateful to you for the many, many, many things you do for all of us. And I wouldn't have known any of this stuff, so thanks so much. And I know that we promised, actually, before we do that, I just want to ask, does anybody have any questions for Cynthia Maria? All right, I think that's a sign that that was pretty clear. I know that Chuck wanted to have a quick discussion on funding. So maybe we can move to that for just a few minutes. So Chuck, are you still there?
I believe he left.
Hi, Mark.
All
Hi,
right.
Cynthia.
Yeah, Deborah, Chuck had to leave, so possibly we could tag that into our next water session, have a discussion in regards to that, so we don't keep people late.
That sounds really great. All right, well, I'm turning it back to my colleague, Jeannie. Thank you, Jeannie.
Thank you. First off, I'd like to thank everybody for being here today. And I'd like to remind you guys that the next RAC meeting is on April 28th from 6 to 8 p.m. I would like to thank all of the speakers for your powerful messages. And we're working on a newsletter to keep everyone informed about what we're doing and what is going on clean water project wise.
All right. Well, thank you, and thanks to everybody. This was a great meeting. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Have a good one.
Thank you. Bye.